Churchill as a mob?
Last evening, a mindless mob cheered him to the echo. Look, tumultuous throng in Downing Street. The Prime Minister addresses a vast, joyous crowd. Forgive me. What man doesn't desire peace? They were led astray. It was his fault, not theirs.
I first met him when I was up at Cambridge. He was the guest of honor at our founders' feast. Middle of the Great Depression, entire families living on the street, while in college we dined on beef. Anyway, after dinner, he gets up to make a speech. I can assure you that no man in this country of ours, despite the difficulties we face at the present juncture, is going to his nightly rest without adequate nourishment. Over 2 million unemployed, hunger marches from Jarrow to the doors of Westminster, and the bloody man tries to pretend all's well with the world. Well, his world, maybe. Not mine.
The problem is, he believes what he is saying. Almost every word of it. The man is so frighteningly sincere.
Which makes him all the more fool dangerous. You may think he's some sort of saint, but I'd rather a rogue led me into battle than a saint or someone in search of eternal life. Give me a rogue any day. Which is, of course, one of your attractions, Mr. Churchill.
More bloody insolence should throw you out, Clemmy would.
Anyway, he started preaching about how dark swathes of England were covered with green shoots. It made me sick to the bottom of my soul.
Delighted to hear you have one.
So I started heckling, was thrown out, of course, caused a hell of a fuss. College bigwigs excused me saying I was drunk, which I wasn't. Well, not very. Like you, Mr. Churchill. It was a matter of conscience.
You're not one of those bloody Bolsheviks, are you? BBC's infested with them.
I'm my own man, Mr. Churchill. As I believe are you.
Chamberlain. His family and mine go back a long way. Our fathers were friends.
Not you and he.
I've tried. God knows I've tried, and I would still, but he flew back from Munich proclaiming victory, yet it was nothing short of a total and unmitigated defeat. We promised to preserve poor Czechoslovakia, to save her for democracy, yet we have abandoned millions of her people to their fate. And all is silent, mournful. It would be better had we never meddled than to have meddled with half a heart and a wanton wrist. And here, back home, Mr. Chamberlain spies on his friends, manipulates the media, as that arse the editor of the Times round for tea. Watching the Prime Minister wriggle with his conscience reminds me of nothing but a shoal of fish being pursued by sharks. And because he is the type of leader who cannot perceive the difference between honor and a cheap headline, once more the lights are going out.
There. You seem to have made a speech.
Words. Mere words. They won't stop the tanks. Bring down a single bomber.
Well, there's no great scarcity value, I grant, not in your case. But at a time like this, they might yet prove rarer than a king's crown.
You flatter me.
I'm no politician. I speak only as I see.
Which is a dark and perilous path.
Very true. Much safer to leave things to you politicians.
It's been a pleasure to talk with you, young man, but you must forgive me. Work to do.
Walls to build.
You're a bloody-minded sort.
You're right. Probably spent too long around Westminster. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Churchill. It's been illuminating. As you say, I must be on my way. Mr. Chamberlain expects me shortly.
What?
Mr. Chamberlain, the Prime Minister, he asked to see me.
But I thought you hated him.
Know thine enemy, isn't that how it goes?
Mr. Chamberlain isn't the enemy.
Is in my book.
Well, perhaps you might have one for the road, young man, before you rush off, if you have time.
If you insist.
Well, not insist, I merely suggest.
In that case, the road can wait. And the Prime Minister. As As you say, Chamberlain trusts no one, least of all his cabinet colleagues. He talks with the French Prime Minister Daladier, but privately, in secret, not through the Foreign Office. Instead, he uses messengers. His own little hobgoblins, as you call them.
I'm intrigued. But how do you know this?
I'm one of them. Daladier has a chef de cabinet called Edouard Fiffer. I'm an old friend of his, and so I travel to Paris, deliver a message for Chamberlain, have a drink or two, maybe three, wait for a reply.
You run errands for Mr. Chamberlain. Pass on messages. Can you tell me what's in them?
You don't think I'd be stupid enough to open them, do you?
I most certainly would. Hitler was a messenger, you know, in the trenches of the last war. Got himself shot, lost one of his testicles, so they say. Nothing but a corporal, yet he ended up with an Iron Cross, and they didn't hand those things out for nothing, not to corporals. Dangerous men, these messengers. You're not a dangerous man, are you?
Still got both bollocks, if that's what you mean.
And a foot in both camps, if you're one of Mr. Chamberlain's men.
Heavens, you think I'm some sort of double agent? Mr. Churchill, how could I possibly lead a double life? Look at me, I have enough difficulty organizing even one.
I take your point. You seem a bird of distinctly ruffled feathers.
Wonderful place you have here, Mr. Churchill.
My palace of enchantments.
Worth defending, then, wouldn't you say?
I had hoped to live nowhere else, to spend my final days here, locked in her embrace. The harsh truth is she has proved an expensive mistress. I can no longer afford to keep her. Just a few months ago, I was forced to place her up for sale.
You're still here?
A most generous friend rescued her, but it can be no more than a temporary respite. The bankers, they circle like vultures.
Should have got rid of her while you still could, before the Germans arrive and use her as stables. Still, look on the bright side. When they do get here, they'll probably shoot the bankers, too.
You have no family yet. You wouldn't understand.
I understand you're a politician, which means there's no need for the rest of us to worry about a thing.
You despise us, but you'll take a politician's glass.
Drink to oblivion, Mr. Churchill, never to excess. Not unless I'm forced to.
I've always taken more out of alcohol than alcohol has ever taken out of me. Though at times, I grant, it's a damn close-run thing.
You loved your father.
Of course. It was a complicated matter.
I know.
What do you know?
Only what you've written about. Bits about your early life. You're a very fine writer, Mr. Churchill. I've read almost everything of yours. You talk about your father with great respect, at times almost awe, but he never repaid those feelings, did he? In truth, he didn't have much time for you.
You seem determined to lash away at all my comforts.
No, merely to throw a light on what you already see.
Leave me with my illusions, for pity's sake. Can't you see that's why I built this place? This is a family home, the home that I never had.
One of his last letters to you couldn't have been more than a couple of years before he died. You just got into Sandhurst.
Oh.
He wrote that you were third class. I no longer hold the slightest weight to anything you might say, he said. Predicted you become a mere social wastrel. Terrible words for a loving son.
He was sick by then, his mind wandering. It may be my entire life has been spent in the struggle to prove him wrong, to win his affection all these years after his death. Even today, he sits on my shoulder like a parrot, chuntering in my ear.
Let me see if I understand. He said you weren't up to the job, and it seems you've come to agree with him.
I warn you, it is possible to know too much for your own good, young man.
I'll try to remember that.
Your own father, what of him?
Not much to say. He was a naval man. Away a lot. I was too young to know him properly.
You said he died peacefully in his bed.
Not exactly, no. He was fucking my mother at the time and had a massive heart attack. Killed in action, so to speak. My mother started screaming and I had to roll him off her.
Oh, dear God.
Still, better than being put up against a wall and shot.
Are you determined to bring everything back to your obsession?
My obsession?